Just to be conscious of time. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Laura Rossi Garcia. I'm faculty in the School of Design, and this year I'm chairing the School of Design Talk Series. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone, hopefully you got the Zoom pop-up reminder that this talk is being recorded. So with that, again, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate our students' achievements. I'd also like to thank the generosity of our donor who made the 2021 Summer Impact Grant a possibility. So this grant called for DePaul School of Design undergraduate students to imagine, develop, and deploy cutting-edge visual and interactive designs that have a positive cultural or social impact. So tonight we'll be hearing from two student group awardees, Rosecrest Romance and Impact 606, whose work spans graphic design, game design, websites, applications, and user experience design. Before hearing from our students, we'll open our event tonight with a keynote presentation by game designer Jenny Nicholson. Very happy to have Jenny here tonight. We'll be discussing how the most critical moments in game design or game development actually happen before you even start designing, and sharing examples both of past successes and failures in creating games that have lasting social impact. Just to go over a little bit of the structure for tonight's event, we'll hear from Jenny, followed by presentations from our students. After each presentation, Jenny will be asking the teams a question. We ask that you hold your questions or just archive them or put them in the chat, both for Jenny and the students. We'll open it up at the end for a Q&A session. And then just a couple of quick announcements. Next week on Thursday, November 4th at the same time, 6 p.m., we'll be holding our second student showcase for the Bridging AI and UX grant, which will open with a keynote by Joe Fish Kay, the Senior Director of Interaction Design and Artificial Intelligence at Anthem Health Partners. The best way to keep track and register for events is to follow us on social media and Eventbrite. I'll be pasting those links for y'all in the chat momentarily. And with that, I'd like to officially introduce Jenny.
Hello, let me get my very cool deck going here. All right, can everybody see my presentation? There we go. Can everybody see what I've got here?
Yes.
All right. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about tonight is focused on games because games are what I love to do. But I think these things are true of any sort of thing that you're making that is like intended to get somebody to think differently, to feel differently, to act differently. So I know some people have made games, some people have made visualizations, but I think even though I say game, all of these things are really true no matter what. I hope so. And if you have any questions about how they apply to things that are not games, I welcome you to ask me. To talk a little bit about myself, I work at an advertising agency. I never thought that I would be in games. I made a game in 2011 called Spent that suddenly shot me onto this trajectory of being somebody who makes games. And in the last 10 years, we've actually made 9 different games on my team that have been played for a cumulative over 25 million times in 236 countries. We made our first game Spent for a local Durham nonprofit called Urban Ministries of Durham. And then we've actually made 8 more games for an amazing nonprofit called Next Gen Personal Finance. So what I want to take you through is some of the things that I have learned in the process of making these 9 games. I ran out of time to really share some of the failures. I know, I feel like those were the things I should have prioritized, but if anybody wants to follow up with me later, because it takes a lot more time to talk about why something failed than it does to talk about why something succeeded. So if anybody wants to know some more about the failures, we can schedule a follow-up session. But I want to talk a little bit about what I learned and I think how it can help when you're building something that is meant to engage people, how you can make something that truly engages. And when you think about it, the usual question, especially if you're making something that's serious, something that's designed to be educational, something that's designed to change people's minds, is the usual question is, what do we want to teach people, right? It's like, we want people to know about this very important thing and how this very important thing works. And that's often where people who are making serious games or serious interactives start. The problem is they often end up here. which is the world of Borecraft. I found the Slate article headline that I thought was so perfect. And never play a video game that's trying to teach you something is the takeaway of this article. And I think, I'm sure there are many of us on this call who have tried to play like an educational game or a serious game that is just like basically an extremely intense educational lesson that's pretending to be a game. And having played some of those, I realized that when you want to make something that is actually going to connect with somebody, that is actually going to change their mind and change their behavior, focusing just on what you want to tell them and on what you want to teach them will not get you anywhere good, because the more important question that I found is, what will they do differently after? So if you even switch your first question from what do we want to tell them to what are they going to do differently after, that changes your mindset so that you're focused on the outcome and on the behavior change, which automatically from the beginning starts changing the choices that you made. But I think an even more important question, even better question, and this is like a little bit of a challenging one sometimes, is why would they bother to engage? It's really easy to feel very passionately about a topic, to think that it's very important, to understand why people should care. But the better way and the better question, the better place to begin is to assume that they don't and try to understand how you can connect with them in a way that's actually going to make them care. You know, especially when we're doing serious games or educational games, we're talking to people who don't care about this thing, whether they actively don't care or whether they've just never thought about it. The mistake that many people make when they're designing these kind of experiences is assuming that people care about it as much as you do. And it kind of sucks to realize that they don't. But once you start from that place, you realize really quickly that you have a lot more power than you thought. And so in order to sort of tell you this story, I want to go all the way back to the very first thing that we ever did for Urban Ministries of Durham. It's kind of funny to share this because it's actually a commercial. I work in an advertising agency. Commercials are part of what I do. And they hired us. And the first thing that we made was a commercial. And I want to show you this commercial because it was a failure. And I'll tell you exactly why it was a failure after I show it to you. So let's watch this little commercial. So people like this commercial, they watched it, they cried, they were like, that's a very emotional, powerful commercial. Did it change their behavior? No. Did it increase donations to Urban Ministries of Durham? No. And so I went back and tried to unpack why it didn't work and using these sort of three questions. And I think this is sort of helpful. Oh, no, I don't want to watch you again. I don't want to watch you again. There we go. So the thing that we wanted to teach was for people to have empathy for homeless people, right? Like it's really hard to be homeless. It's not nice to ignore a homeless person asking for money. But then when you ask the question, what we wanted them to do differently, I was like, feel bad? Which the problem is like anybody who has ever walked by a homeless person asking for money or standing at an intersection, like what do you feel when that happens? You feel bad. You already feel bad. So us making a commercial that's like, that's not nice, actually didn't do anything to change their behavior because it didn't bring anything new or different into the situation. It was like, feel bad. And it's like, well, I already feel bad. I've been feeling bad my entire life every time I ignore somebody who's asking for money. So what are you actually doing to prompt me to do something differently? And with that in mind, if you think about like what would make them engage with that, what is a hook that would get them in and get them to think differently or act differently, there really wasn't anything there, because what it was a very, very pretty attempt to tell them something that they already knew, to make them feel something that they already feel, to tell them that this thing that they're already doing, that they already know probably isn't the best way to support people in need, was something they shouldn't do. And so the next year we got an opportunity to do something different. And I remember the client said that they wanted their mission for that year was share the journey. And what they were asking for was to share the journey of what it's like to be somebody who comes to Urban Ministries of Durham and like has an experience there and what it's like to like get back on your feet. And using this framework, what I learned from doing something that really didn't change anybody's minds, hearts, or behavior is I realized that the journey of somebody once they go to a homeless shelter and how they get back up, I'm like, that's actually not the journey that people need to know. It's the journey of everything that happens before you get to the homeless shelter. And that's sort of what leads to Spent. And I'll share with you a little video. Just if you haven't seen it, so that'll give you sort of an overview of it.
Even as unemployment and foreclosures rise all around them, the average person living a comfortable existence can't imagine allowing their lives to sink so low as to beg for food on a street corner. And as a result, people are less likely to give time, money, and resources to homelessness than other causes like cancer or education. Unlike other organizations, Urban Ministries of Durham doesn't just treat the homeless. It also serves those who are in danger of becoming homeless, people who look a lot like us.
And if you ever wondered how bad it could get and how quickly it could happen, here's a challenge for you. You're out of work, almost out of savings, almost out of hope, and you have tough choices to make. You have $95 in your bank account, and your child needs $15 for a class field trip. What do?
Spent forces players to face the consequences of every decision those living on the brink must face. Players see the financial toll their decisions take with a scale that tracks available funds. They feel an emotional toll when they can't afford to contribute $20 to help a sick coworker, or when they have no other choice but to swallow their pride and ask friends on Facebook for help. The game either ends when you run out of money or when you can't take it anymore. But if you're lucky, you'll make it through the month. Could you make it?
We'll skip that because those are old. So one of the things that I think is interesting about Spent is you look at the way that Spent answers those questions compared to the way that commercial answers those questions. So really the goal was the same, was to teach people to have empathy for somebody whose life is very different. But if you think about what we wanted them to do differently, we wanted them to actually understand that poverty is an unwinnable game, that it's a no-win situation, that being poor is really hard. But what made them engage that was really different is if you think about the first commercial, it's like, oh, being poor is hard. Like they have so little, you have so much, you should share, which everybody knows that. But what we did differently in Spent is if you go to try to play Spent, the question that greets you at the beginning is, Urban Ministries serves 12,000 people a year, but you'd never need help, right? And then the button says, prove it. And taking this sort of angle that where we went from pity to actually making it a challenge is like, oh, so you think you should do better or could do better? That is what made the difference between something that everybody was like, oh, that makes me feel sad, I'm not going to do anything differently, to an experience that actually has changed the way that many schools teach poverty education. Several people have done their dissertations on Spent. People have actually found that young people, when they play Spent, there is a statistically significant increase in empathy for people in poverty and understanding of what it's like. And really the difference was the first one, we were like, we want to tell people that it's really hard. And the second one was, what do we need to do to get them to actually care about how hard it is? And really that change in question has changed everything that I've done ever since. And so I'll share with you some of the examples. I really like a GIF, you'll have to forgive me. So does Cookie Monster. It really changed everything that I did, opened my mind up and made me realize that question of why would they care or what would make them engage is really the most important one. So we've made 8 games for a nonprofit called Next Gen Personal Finance, as I said. And I want to take you through some of them, because the thing that we realized is that when you do serious games, there's often this tendency to try to teach people everything they need to know, right? Like if you're going to cover a topic, you're going to educate them all about that topic so that they never have to have a teacher and they will learn everything. But the outcome is you end up with a didactic lesson disguised as a game, which everybody hates, right? Everybody, I read something that said that's like taking broccoli and covering it in frosting and hoping that people won't realize that they're eating broccoli. And what we realized really quickly with doing these next gen games is that our job is not to teach students the ins and outs of these very complicated, intricate financial literacy topics. Our job is to actually get the students to a place when the teacher starts teaching, they care. They care about the topic and they understand why it matters to them. And so I'll give you some examples of what that means. So our very first project that we did for Next Gen was they wanted to teach financial literacy around paying for college. They wanted students to think about how much they're spending in student loans. They wanted students to pay attention to the money, to the interest rates, things that usually you don't pay attention to. And when we started to think about what we wanted them to do differently, we said, you know what we want them to do is come away seeing college as an investment that has to have a return on investment, and as an investment that they control. If you think about, I mean, some of you are not very long away from having done this. When you're looking for college, it's very much like, well, who is going to pick me? And I want to go to the best place where I can get in. And it's a very powerless thing, right? Where you're like, they will pick me and I will go there and I'll figure everything else out later. And one of the things we realized that we wanted them to do was actually recognize that they have some control and choice in the matter. And that even if you go to the best school that you can go to, if you actually don't get a very good financial aid package, like that's actually going to hurt you in the long run. And in terms of what made them engage, we realized that like when you're starting to look for a school and a college, understanding the impact of the interest rate that you're going to get charged on your student loans after your deferment is over and you have to pay it like after you graduate is not something that they're thinking about right now. That's not something that high schoolers are. They maybe know that they should, but that's not what they care about. So really the angle that made Payback powerful is focusing on what they do care about, which is what college is going to be like. And so we took a college test drive and used that as a way to help them understand the true cost of college. So I'll share this with you.
College graduates are drowning in debt. Loans for higher education exceed all other consumer loans except for mortgages.
And I talk to parents who are taking kids to these schools is 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000.
I know a law school that's 80,000 a year.
What?
So after I graduated, I had about 26,000.
$40,000.
32 grand.
$48,000.
20,000.
Close to 100,000. $41,190.
How many of you guys are planning to go to college? How many of you already know exactly how much it's going to cost and how you're going to pay for it?
We all know student debt is a problem in our country. So why isn't it changing? To a 17-year-old, the idea of tens of thousands of dollars is abstract. It doesn't mean anything to them. We had to find a way to make it relevant. So we made Payback, a game designed to help students learn about financing for college and all the challenges they're going to encounter. Put in your information, select a college, and see how every decision you make affects your student loan balance.
Do we really need a microwave?
We need no fridge.
We gonna eat ramen noodles.
We asked ourselves, what do high school students worry about when it comes to college? Because it's not interest rates. It's things like, where am I going to get in? Will I like my roommate? What do I need for my dorm room? So we actually built that into the challenges. If you just pick the cheapest option, or you're not feeding yourself, if you're not paying attention to the things that make you a happy and healthy person, you're going to burn out. We really want students to see that college is an investment, one with benefits, but also with risks. At first glance, Payback may look like a simple game, but in 14 minutes, it can change a student's financial future.
All high schoolers should play this.
It's very weird hearing my own voice on that video, but I think that was just such an eye-opener for me. So we put in this game. There are some mini games throughout Payback, and we put in this game at the beginning to pick the things for your dorm room. And we thought that students would spend like 90 seconds deciding. When we watched playtests, they spent 7 minutes deciding what they were going to buy for their dorm room. So this thing that we thought we would put in for some fun color, like they actually took it so seriously because that was the part of college that they could sort of connect with, is that idea of like, you're going to have to get stuff. And so it was a really eye-opening experience for us about this thing that we thought was sort of a casual, quick thing that would make it more fun, like watching them take it so seriously, argue over whether or not they need a fridge, really drove home for me how important it is to recognize what's going to be important to the people that you're trying to reach, and make sure that you're meeting them where they are, instead of being like, here's what we want to say, come and get it. Because unfortunately, in a world where you're competing not just with video games and television shows, but every single person on TikTok who has something interesting to say, the people that you follow on Instagram, YouTube videos, like you gain a lot when you recognize that nobody is looking for the thing that you're trying to tell them. You have to find some way to connect it to what they care about and what they want, and to be relevant, or else they're just not going to make time for it. And so that was a really eye-opening thing. So another example,
College graduates.
no, we don't want to watch.
drowning
I know how to
in
work a
debt.
computer. So another example is our next gen client came to us and said, we want to do a game that helps students understand loans. I'm like, okay, that sounds not fun. That sounds kind of boring. That was what it was teach, how to read a loan offer. And when we thought about what you want them to do differently afterwards, we say, well, we want them to pay attention, because if you go to get a new car or to get any kind of loan, most people, all they pay attention to is how much the monthly payment is going to be. And that's why, if any of you ever go to buy a car, the first thing they will ask you is, what kind of monthly payment do you want? Because what they do is they give you the monthly payment that you want, and they pull all of these sneaky levers in the background so that you get the monthly payment that feels good, but you don't realize what they're doing to rip you off. And that idea of not getting ripped off was what drove us to the idea that we ended up making. And what made them engage is like, who doesn't want to be the bad guy sometimes, right? We all want to be good people. It's like the reason Grand Theft Auto is such a successful game, right? Like, who doesn't want to just like wreak havoc on the world? And so that's the sort of insight that we use to get them to doing the different action, to eventually at the end learning how to read a loan offer. But instead of starting with that, we started with why they would care. We went to what we wanted them to take away, and they end up at the end understanding the levers that loan companies pull to give you a loan. But if we had started there, we probably would definitely not have made this. So when you play Shady Sam, basically what happens is it's your first day of work at a sleazy loan shark, and your only goal is to issue the loan that makes the most money for the company. And your job is to rip people off and make the most money. And as a reward, you get emails on this little screen from your boss who tells you you're doing a good job and gives you fun things for your desk. And the deliciousness of that gets students to actually get very invested and pay close attention. That if you really look, the secret of Shady Sam is if you look really closely at it, it's just an extremely well-designed multiple choice quiz where you get 3 loan offers and you have to pick the one that makes the most money for the company. But wrapping it in this idea of being the bad guy, of making your goal to rip off people, especially people who are in tough situations, that adds a sort of energy and tension that takes a multiple choice quiz and makes it something that actually sticks with people for a longer period of time. See how my one more. We just launched. Oh no, guys, I really know how to do this. Okay, so we just actually launched our newest game for Next Gen Personal Finance last week, and the client came to us and he said, "I want to do a game about entrepreneurship." And the thing is, there are a lot of games about entrepreneurship. I don't know if anybody's played the lemonade stand game or the paperclip. That one's paperclip game. This one's kind of weird, but you know, the question was, what do you want out of an entrepreneurship game? What do you want students to take away? And what he wanted them to take away was to truly understand what it takes to succeed, right? Because you see all these people who are like, I launched Airbnb and now I'm a mazillionaire. And it sounds like very fun and easy, but it's not. But then we said, well, why are they going to care about this? What is going to make this something that if I'm a high school student in 2021 is going to give me anything differently than I can't already get from the Lemonade game or any of those sort of, Sim City or any of those sort of like empire building games? And what we realized is that we had to focus on the business they're most interested in. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, what are they interested in? And when we did our research, we found this amazing statistic, which is that 86% of young Americans, if you ask them what their number one career goal is, they say that they want to be a social media influencer. And that number is skewed because, in the 20s, it's a little bit lower, but especially under the age of 18, it is remarkable how many young people say that's what they want to do for a living. And we're like, well, guess we know what we're going to make our game about. So we ended up actually just launching last week this game called Influenced, which is really about, can you handle the day-to-day business of being an influencer? Because one of the things that we realized is that if you're just looking at influencers on your feed or on your For You page, it looks pretty fun. It looks pretty easy. You look kind of cute. You get to wear bikinis, hang out on beaches, sell stuff, and it looks like a good time. But once you get into the day-to-day grind of it, you realize that becoming an influencer is like any other business. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of hope, and there's no guarantee that you're going to succeed. So one of the things we did is, knowing that there is this 86% of people want to become an influencer quote in the world, we actually ask a simple question at the end that just says, do you still want to be an influencer? And way fewer than half people say no. So it was kind of interesting to make something that tapped into something that people thought they wanted, and then to actually be able to see that after they did it, they did not want to do it anymore. So I wanted to show you just a couple examples of how, when you ask these questions, it forces you to actually come up with a little bit more unexpected of a solution, something that's going to have a hook, because it's so easy when you're working on something, especially a topic that you're really passionate about. It's so easy to assume that everybody is going to care as much as you do. And the worst thing in the world, but in some ways the most empowering thing in the world, is to recognize that they don't, and they won't. But if you come in assuming that they won't, and try to find where you can meet them, where they're actually going to care, it becomes a lot more exciting. It becomes a bigger creative challenge. And I think the things that you come up with are a lot more fun. Had somebody told me 5 years ago that I would have made a game where somebody works as a sleazy loan shark selling people bad loans so that they can get stupid things for their desk, I would have been like, you can't do that for your job. Yet here I am. So I want to leave you just a couple bonus things, but wait, there's more. I am in advertising after all. I have to have a little bit of a dangler. A couple things I wanted to tell you. I meant to change that, ran out of time. We're going to blow minds again. One of the great things about serious games is you can take any mechanic that has ever been used in any game in any time and actually use that to amplify your message. So most game mechanics, they're just to make people want to play the game more. But when you're doing a game or any sort of interactive experience where you have a purpose and a message, you can actually use those mechanics to boost your message. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So one of the games that we made is this game called Build Your Stacks. And the reason we made stacks is that most students, when they learn how to invest in the stock market, they learn the way that I did many, 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 many years ago, which is they get $10,000 in imaginary money and they get 8 weeks to invest it. And the person with the most money at the end of 8 to 10 weeks wins, which is, as any financial advisor will tell you, the worst way to learn how to invest your money. The best way to invest money is to put it in an index fund, don't pay attention to it, keep that regular contribution coming and ignore it for a really long time. And so we made this entire simulation where you actually can cover 20 years of investing in 20 minutes. And if you look at it, it's honestly kind of boring. It's like a simulation. You got a stock market thing, you got a CD, there's an index fund. It's not that fun. And so one of the things we said, is there a way that we can add something that's going to make the game more fun, but is also going to help drive our message home? And what we decided to do was to make it multiplayer. So you can actually join as a group and play with your whole classroom, or you can play by yourself, but you're always playing against somebody else. And the somebody else, that whether you play with a lot of people or just you, the person you're always playing against is the computer. And the secret is the computer, and you don't find this out until the end, all the computer does is put its money in index funds. That's all it does. And we basically did data for a very huge swath of years. I think we did like 80 or 90 years, and we sort of adjusted them so the money was all the same. But you can get any 20-year period within this like larger time. And what you discover is the computer invariably almost always wins. So even when good old Noah, I stole this off the internet, good old Noah won, but the computer came in second place. So having people try to beat the computer gives them a little bit of motivation, and each other gives them some motivation, gives them the desire to beat everybody. But also when they don't beat the computer, it actually gives us an opportunity to double down on that message of perhaps passive investing is not the worst idea in the world. Another example, we made this game called Money Magic. We had to make a budgeting game. And one of the problems with games is that it's very easy when you're playing a game to do what you think you should do, right? Like if you're playing a game about budgeting and it's not real life, you're like, well, I'm just going to save my money because I'm playing a game about saving and budgeting. So that's the right thing to do. So one of the things that we had to figure out is, how do you actually get somebody to have to choose between wants and needs in the simulated environment? And we realized, we read this article, I found this article that's about this guy who serves as the money manager for like NBA athletes. And he has a really hard job because he's trying to take care of them, and they like make all this money and they want to buy all these things. And he's like the guy who's like, no, you can have 2 Lamborghinis, but more than 2 Lamborghinis is too many. And that's what really made us realize that if we want people to understand this sort of pull between gratification and savings, we just have to invent somebody else who represents the wants, because you'll never actually be honest. And so that's where we invented Enzo, our crazy magician. So your goal with Money Magic is to save enough money to get Enzo to his headlining gig in Vegas. But along the way, we needed to find some way to keep people engaged, because essentially Money Magic is just a budget slider. It's a budget slider with a lot of excitement around it that makes people feel like they're doing something more than just doing a budget slider. And what we realized is that we opened a trick shop. And so you could actually buy special tricks to make Enzo's shows more successful, and you had to unlock them and spend money on them. So one of the ways we made the game more exciting, we tempted people to buy things they didn't need, was with these silly little animations that you could not unlock unless you bought them in the trick store. Just like if you want to play Fortnite and you want to look cool, you're probably going to want a skin that's not the one that comes with the game as soon as you first start playing. So here's a little example of the trick. Oops, no, I really clearly, here we go. So we made these tiny little animations that all they are dumb little animations. This is a trick where he turns a chicken into an egg. And the number of students who said that they lost out and had to play again because they spent all of their money on tricks because they wanted to see what the next trick was really eye-opening. So it was great because it forced them to end up playing twice, the first time where they got all their wants, and then the second time where they actually had to budget carefully. And then the last thing, when you're making these serious games, you guys did this for school, so it's a little bit different, but when you make these serious games out in the world, one thing you don't generally have is a generous media budget. So part of my job is I lead creative for clients like Sherwin-Williams and Pampers, where the gift of it is that I have lots of money to pay to make sure that people see it. Where when you're doing things, this gift, sorry, I got a little carried away. When you're doing things that are serious games, when you're working for nonprofits, often you don't have that luxury. You have to make something that is going to get itself out into the world. And so as you're building these experiences, think about what is going to make somebody share it. What can you do so that people who are playing this experience and are liking this experience, how can they actually help you spread the word? Because generally you do not have the money to spread it without their help. And so 2 examples. So one of the things that we did in Spent is you'll notice when you play Spent that there are options where you have to spend money that you don't have, or you can get to the next round without spending any money, but you have to actually share on social something that you need. So you see here, if you actually search for Spent, you can see just in the course of a couple hours, several people were like, good old Nina, she was really wanting some help. I can't afford to take care of my pet anymore. Can you give it a home? I need to do laundry, but I can't afford the laundromat. Can I come over to your house? I can't pay all my bills this month and I need to borrow $175. Can you help me out? And what was so nice about this is A, it allowed people to keep going in the game. B, it made them actually, and people said when they played it, that even though they knew it was a game, even though they knew it wasn't real, having to hit that button to share that ask for help was still really uncomfortable. So it actually gave them sort of that extra empathy building experience of having to humble themselves. And then on the selfish game developer and designer side, they are basically giving us free advertising for our game, because somebody who sees this on Twitter is like, wait, what is this? I want to check this out. And similarly on Shady Sam, we ask them their name at the beginning for their first day of work. We call them by their name throughout the game. All the emails that they get on their old computer from Shady Sam say their name. And then at the end, you get, depending on how shady you were, you get an adjective that kind of gives you some props for being evil. And you're able to say, they call me this name, this adjective plus my name because I made this much money off fools who didn't pay attention to their loan terms. And people really like bragging about that. And it gives them actually, not only does it make them want to share it because it's kind of funny and it's silly and it's their name, but it makes them want to play more than once because they want to get that number as high as possible before they share that. So even though maybe it feels like a little bit gross when you're developing these serious things, like one of the pieces of advice I want to give you is a game or an interactive experience that nobody engages with might as well not happen, might as well not exist. So if you're not thinking from the beginning, what can I do to make sure that people see this and that people share it, you're really limiting the impact that you can have. That's it. I'm done. Looking forward to seeing everybody's presentations and stopping talking for a little bit.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Everyone wants to join me in clapping. That was fantastic. And I feel like I need to play all these games to improve my own financial literacy. So to keep us moving, I'm gonna introduce our first team, Rosecrest Romance. And like I said, at the end, if you have questions for Jenny, we'll open up to a Q&A. So please do save them or put them in the chat and we can do a big Q&A at the end. So Rosecrest Romance includes game designers Ross Chapman and Quinn Davis, with international studies student Abby Kingsley and computer science student Michael Vanderwerf. They developed a mobile dating simulator game. Rosecrest Romance is a visual novel dating simulator that will teach young people about healthy relationships and the red flags to look out for in relationships through a simulated fantasy experience. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Rosecrest.
Let me just get the presentation going.
Sounds great.
Hello, everyone. We have affectionately called ourselves Frog Squad Studios, and we are the creators of Rosecrest Romance. So we already got a brief introduction, but I'm Abby Kingsley. I'm majoring in international studies, so I'm a little bit of an outsider here. But I am one of the writers of Rosecrest Romance, and I also did some UI design and sound design, stuff like that.
Hi, I'm Ross Chapman. I'm a game design student at DePaul, and I did writing and world building for Rosecrest Romance.
My name is Quinn Davis. I was a game design major and animation minor, and I graduated from DePaul in June 2021. I was a character artist for the game and also did some of the UI art.
And then last but not least, my name is Michael Vanderwerf. I was a computer science major at DePaul and I graduated just recently in 2021. I was basically the programmer for the game, and I also was a technical consultant for our technical limitations when we were making the game.
So to really understand the concept behind Rosecrest Romance, it's important to look at other games in the genre. So in the dating simulator genre, also known as otomes, these games tend to kind of glorify some toxic behavior. They're very sensationalized romances. They're kind of fictional text-based role-playing games where the player gets the opportunity to romance these fictional characters. And they're often targeted towards youth, impressionable teenagers who might not have a full grasp on really what a romantic relationship even is. And so they're at an even higher risk of internalizing those toxic behaviors as being normal or even positive. And so as some examples, there's some screenshots from popular dating simulator games. On the top left, right, I know my directions. On the top right, you can see Demon Boy. He's saying, "We took over your phone so we can always stay in touch." Obviously crossing some boundaries, being very controlling and possessive. And then on the bottom right, these are vampires that you can romance. And we took a screenshot of the description of this app. It describes the experience of romantic relationships as being mysterious and dangerous in this game, and also contributes. There's another trope in the dating simulator genre of kind of falling in love under a lot of pressure, or these very intense power dynamics where the player has very little control over their life. So it says here you can fall in love under desperate situations. So in response to that, our goals are to ensure that the player always feels in control during our game. We want to make sure that we respect their bodily autonomy. We want to remain sensitive to where the player is coming from. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know if they've experienced controlling behavior in relationships in the past. We want to make sure that it is immersive and interesting beyond the educational component. So kind of like Jenny was saying, we want to make sure that they're hooked in because of the storyline, and then also getting familiar with kind of the rhetoric of setting boundaries and saying no. So we want to limit the amount of lecturing.
So keeping those goals in mind, we had some things that we knew we needed to work into the design of the game. We wanted to create space between reality and the game experience. So we chose a fantasy kingdom as the setting for Rosecrest Romance. And this is so that some of the red flags that may reflect situations in real life that would threaten someone's like bodily autonomy, for example, instead threaten the kingdom that you're in charge of as the prince or princess. And this allows for the players to distance themselves from the conflict while still learning about those concepts. We're also emphasizing the player customization so that so the audience will be able to internalize the messaging and identify with the character even more. So we gave the player the option to choose like their body type, skin color, and hair color to encourage this. And like Abby was saying, it's important to us that the player doesn't feel lectured to about what's right and wrong. We wanted to mainly present them with the opportunity to learn about these situations and what each outcome would be depending on what they did.
So for the process, Abby and I were working on the script, which was the story of the game. Abby took on more of the romantic interests, while I tackled side characters and the kind of overall structure of the world. So things such as even the kingdom name of Rosecrest and those kinds of ideas, and where the problems that interact with the kingdom come from. So like we were saying earlier, we want to make sure that it has something beyond just the romance in the story. So we took that, we split it into parts, which you can see in kind of our outline here. And then each did our different parts of the script in hopefully a way that would work out and just be able to be imported into the program.
And on the topic of the scripts, so I worked closely with both Ross and Abby to try to find a middle ground between what was easy and worked directly in the engine and required very little work for me, and what was easy to write and not cumbersome and not taking away from their valuable time of actually writing the script. So that was the bulk of my work, was basically being a middleman between the actual script and the engine we were putting the game in, RenPy, which was cumbersome at times because the documentation for RenPy is very robust, but a little bit out of date. So yeah, that was what I worked on with RenPy. And then I also helped get all of the, the user interface and basically everything that everyone else came up with. I made sure it appeared on the screen right.
So this is just kind of an overview of the process that we went through for the art assets. At the top are the first sketches I did for the project. I was trying to figure out what kind of style to draw the characters in, and it ended up kind of being a cartoony Disney-esque style. That was simple enough that it let me create everything in a timely manner, but also was hopefully nice to look at. On the left is how most of the characters started. I would create their overall shape and features, then their outfit, researching like medieval outfits that are kind of the most fantasy outfits are based on, and then put some of our own settings aspects into them. I would take little notes about what I wanted to remember for later, and sometimes prototype textures. And then for the backgrounds, we had another artist make them, Alana Lee, and we used some of our budget to outsource some of the game assets to her in order to get everything done in a timely manner.
And then here we have a little trailer we put together for the game.
So that was a trailer I put together with bits of our game that is meant to go on the App Store afterwards. The main idea was to introduce the story some, show the basic premise of it, but also just grab people more. So not directly showing the educational bits, but more of getting people interested in the story, so then we can show them the educational stuff more subtly. But yeah.
Yeah, so we are grateful to be partnering with GeForce Learning. They're a company that has done some publishing for mobile games in the past, and they're also going to be helping us handle playtesting. For playtesting, we have a lot of friends who are already offering volunteering to playtest it for us, but we're also going to be doing some incentivized playtesting because it's really important to us to reach that target audience of, preteens and teens, so that we can make sure that the content resonates with them and is engaging for them. In terms of the actual educational content and our goals of helping youth figure out how to set boundaries like that, we met with Drew at Jennifer Ann's group. As we began researching, he was very helpful in kind of giving us those keywords that we might not have known as outsiders to look out for and to guide our research, as well as helping us set our priorities, and just really keep us focused on making sure that this works and doesn't feel like a quiz, but also they take something away from it. So where we are currently, Act 1 of the game will begin testing, and we will be sending a version over to Drew so that he can do a content review as well.
And so as for where we're going to take the project going forward, we have a whole Act 2 planned for the game that should hopefully, help close out the story and help just tie it all together. As mentioned, we have further playtesting planned. Specifically, Apple playtesting is planned, but will probably come later in the process because test flight can be a little bit cumbersome sometimes. And then we'd also like to do some general polish, clean up some of the art assets, make some small UI changes, so it's just a little bit more user-friendly for people on their phones. And then we also have been talking with some individuals who are interested in promoting our game so that we can reach a wider audience and make sure that people are playing it and it's not just sitting on the App Store on its lonesome. And as mentioned, the game will hopefully end up on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. And then as we end up our presentation here, here's Nofri the gnome on our right, one of the advisors for our main character.
That's our presentation.
It always takes me a second to unmute myself. I'm like, where's the button? Fantastic
That's
work.
fair.
Congratulations. It's really great to see the whole project and see all the work you've been doing over the past few months. I'm going to pass it to Jenny, who will be asking you all a question, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, it's hard to pick just one. One of the things that I love about this is, especially with serious games, what you did was you tapped into something that was actually happening in culture. I play many more phone games than I should, but I'm always getting ads for those weird dating games. It's like, are you going to cheat on so-and-so? And is he going to be so mad? They're very weird. So I like that you took something that was happening in culture and gave it a little bit of a surprising twist. So one of the questions that I have for you though, is doing that is also challenging, because how do you decide where to make the tool? If you wait too long, people are like, oh, this is just another one of these games. If you do it too soon, it's like, oh, I see what you're doing. And then I'm also curious my question is two parts. One is, how did you decide when was the right time? I'm assuming at some point when you're playing this game, you realize oh, I see what's happening here. So how did you decide when you were going to start making that pivot? And then I was also interested in this. I'm cheating and doing two questions, Laura. I'm sorry. Okay. I was also interested in that you were talking about how you wanted to sort of abstract the topic a little bit. And I've done one of the failures that I didn't share is when I abstracted a topic too far that people did not understand the point that we were trying to make. So I guess that's sort of a two-sided balance question. It's how did you decide when to start bringing in what was actually happening? Because you use the sort of dating simulator as a hook. And then the other part is, how did you decide how much to abstract it so people would still get the idea without, like you said, making it feel a little bit too close?
I guess I'll at least tackle that first question if everyone's okay with that. Okay, I'm not hearing any objections.
Yeah, sorry.
So it was definitely a difficult decision to figure out when to let them start noticing those red flags, because there has to be some kind of conflict that they can learn from and figure out how to deal with that confrontation. And so originally we were going to do 3 acts, and the first act is just a get to know you session with all of the romantic suitors, so that you can kind of find them, attractive and appealing before they kind of show the uglier bits of them, I guess. And they're all still good people, and we do have an introduction phase, but it was important to us that we bring the content in early enough that it can make an impact. But the way that we've done it, we're really trying to balance it so that these relationships feel worth fighting for, I guess. There's still a lot of potential in them. And so, for example, one of the red flags that happen early on is one of the suitors kind of just makes a passing comment about how you like to eat your food with some honey drizzled on top. And then the player is just given this narrative about how like that comment sticks with you at the end of the day, and how the date was so nice, but you kind of wish that he hadn't criticized you for that or made you feel alienated for that. And so we want to show how those kinds of comments can build up and make you feel kind of like a stranger in this relationship, and then what to do about it.
We like then also use the advisors as like not only like advice for how to go about these things, but also like you could bring up these issues with them, and they can be like that supporting voice in your life that tells you like, hey, that's actually not right. It's like when you talk with a friend about relationship stuff, and you bring up something that you're like, it's nothing that big, but they can be like, well, hold on now.
I'm not sure if we answered your second question.
Oh yeah, my second question was how, because you were talking about bodily autonomy and then the kingdom, and I was like, that's a dangerous dance, because they're like, I'm protecting the kingdom, I'm protecting my. So I was curious, like how far you pushed it, because when you tell this story, it sounds like it's actually pretty clear. I'm like trying to have a relationship, they're pushing my boundaries, I have to say no. So I was curious at how many conversations you had or didn't have about how much to abstract it and how much to keep it close.
It was a very early conversation for us. I remember when we were still trying to debate whether or not to even apply for the grant or start making the game, I was asking them, how do we do this without making them feel uncomfortable or unsafe? And so rather than threaten them, there will be some kind of like vague threats or just overstepping of boundaries. Many of the suitors are also kind of political figures. And so they will kind of like try to take over some of your influence in the kingdom, or try to speak directly to the people in your kingdom rather than letting you speak for yourself. And so in that way, they're still crossing boundaries, but I think since it doesn't necessarily happen in such a romantic setting, then it allows more of a distance and doesn't threaten the character's physical space at all.
That's really interesting. I like that, because you're right, that sort of political influence or trying to take over and run your kingdom for you, that makes a lot of sense. Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Amazing work, you all. It's great to hear. I just want to clap again if anyone wants to join me. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
right,
thank you so much.
Then, I will introduce our next team, Impact 606. This team is comprised of user experience design students Selma Elkasevich, Tori Smolin, and Ashley Lee, and game designer SJ Singh. And they developed an interactive map of pollution sites in Chicago that is designed to highlight environmental justice and disparity across neighborhoods. So I'll hand it over to them.
Awesome. Let me get this presenting. All right. Hi, I'm Selma, and I worked with Tori and Ashley on our Impact 606 project. With the guidance of our project advisor, Michael Diendo, we were able to design a website that would help the community of Chicago learn more about the environmental injustice in the city through the use of an interactive map. So now Tori will explain the project background. So I kind of became aware of this disparity when I took a class at DePaul through the Stay-In Center, which if you're not familiar with it, has a lot to do with service-based learning and taking courses and doing work that also impacts the general Chicago community. And so I took GO 200 with Professor Heather Smith, which kind of highlighted that disparity in the organizations that are working towards it. And so we decided to focus the impact part of our presentation on working towards this disparity. So if you're not familiar with it, Chicago's south and southeast sides are heavily overburdened with pollution and industry. A lot of polluting companies move from the north to the south, or they just go directly to the south side. A lot of things get approved or brushed over, or EPA violations aren't taken as seriously as they should be. And it's become a very great issue that not only impacts just kind of the well-being, but the health. There's, that's why COVID was so rampant in the south and southeast sides, is even just being around all of this toxicity really impacts someone's immune system. So it is a really all-encompassing factor on people's lives. So as you can see here in these two pictures, these are from a landfill by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That's at the mouth of the Calumet River, and this landfill is like leaking into the river and also into the drinking water that comes from Lake Michigan. So it doesn't even just affect just one part of Chicago, but all of Chicago. And there are tons of organizations and advocates in the South and Southeast sides that are already doing work. There's been work that's being done for this for decades and decades. The issue is making sure that their work and their information and their voice gets spread farther up and all throughout Chicago so that people can make educated decisions regarding policies, and when they see things on the news, so that they can understand it in full depth, so they can vote officials into office that are taking this issue seriously. In these images, this is the former US Steel site in the South Shore. As you can see on the left, just a little bit, that like little wooden thing is actually supposed to be a rock climbing wall. So if you kind of compare that to Maggie Daly Park, that's what the city put in the South. There's not even like safety features or any monitoring being done there. And so our goal was to create some kind of tool that these organizations that are already doing work could use to spread their message further north. They could spread it to elementary schools, even someone just clicking on it on social media, making a really easy, approachable, and kind of low commitment way for people to learn about this, so that even if it's something that's not currently impacting them, they can make sure that they're aware of it, and they can kind of assist in that general mission of making lives better for all of Chicago.
So for the map design, we researched pollution sites and developments and then incorporated them in the map so users would be able to visually see the locations of the sites and how they interact with each other. The map was developed using Leaflet.js, which is a JavaScript library for interactive maps. And then once the map was developed in a source code editor and was working properly, it was easy to embed it in the WordPress site. The map features color-coded icons that represent the pollution sites and developments. And then when the user clicks on the icons, a pop-up appears and there's an explanation about what the location is and its significance. With the features, the map is easy to use and understand, and it's an important part of our website because all the information the user needs is in one place.
About the site features, so when deciding which feature we were going to have in our website, it was important that we make it as approachable as possible, so user would not feel overwhelmed and leave the site before learning anything new. Our primary tool was our interactive map, which allow users to visualize where these pollution and development sites are in a way that visually show the inequity, and to click on locations to learn more. For purpose of accessibility, we also included text description of these pollution sites underneath the map to ensure that the environmental justice education were not a barrier to the impact of the site. We also included a glossary of environmental interested terms as well as hyperlinking them in our description for easy and immediate access. Finally, so that viewers could learn more and support the existing advocacy work of community members, we have a page dedicated to the community organization that are working towards environmental justice in South Chicago.
So now we're going to do a little site walkthrough of our site. It's live if you'd like to follow along at impact606.org. So here you land on our homepage and you can see just kind of an overall description of the project. If you're not somebody who's heard about it before, you're just clicking on a link from social media, you can see what our purpose is and why we've done this. We just have some brief instructions on how to use the map as well as kind of just a key. So this is the map that someone came up with. If you're viewing, it also works better on Chrome because of Safari pop-up limitations. And it's really intuitive because it works just in the same way that Google or Apple Maps works in terms of how you scroll and how you go about it. And if you click on a location, you can see one, if you scroll out just the disparity between the north and the south sides. I mean, the blue marks are pollution sites and the green marks are developments, which is something that our community partner wanted us to include. And you can see just how heavy the pollution is just in these small communities of Chicago versus the whole of Chicago. And if you click on one, it gives you a description, tells you about the site itself. And also if you click on any of these hyperlinks, it leads you directly to a definition of that term so that prior knowledge on this topic is not a barrier to understanding and using our tool. And also whether it be for personal preference, technology capabilities, physical abilities, we also have all of our locations listed in the bottom if the map's not a plausible option for somebody. And here we also have the sources listed for all of the information that we have in case anybody wants to learn more or cross-reference. We have a brief about page, which just kind of describes us and our project. But here we have a community and orgs page. So these are all of the community organizations, well, a good majority of the community organizations that are doing work for environmental injustice in South and Southeast sides of Chicago already, so that we didn't want this to just be something somebody clicks on and never thinks about again. You know, they can go and even so much as follow these organizations on Instagram, incorporate that advocacy work and that news into their social media feeds, or they can learn more. They can learn about how to volunteer, how to get involved. And a special shout out to the Alliance of the Southeast, because that was our particular community partner. We worked with the leader of the organization to kind of develop what they think was what they thought was most important and what they really wanted to see in this tool. And lastly, if somebody just wants to learn in general about environmental terms and how to better understand news on environmental justice when they see it in like their news feeds on news channels, there's just a long list of some environmental terms that come up a lot that are really important to understand the weight of what people are talking about when they discuss these kinds of topics.
And we would like to thank a few people for their contribution to our project success. Firstly, Amelia Nieto Gomez of the Alliance of the Southeast for being our community partner that helped us understand what the community needed from a tool such as Impact 606. Our project advisor, Michael DeAnda, for helping us channel our idea into a project and providing us helpful feedback along the way. Additionally, Professor Heather Smith of the DePaul Geography Department for her assistance in connecting us to community resources and partner to provide the most accurate information possible regarding environmental justice. And finally, we would like to thank DePaul University and the School of Design for the opportunity to work and develop Impact 606.
We clap now? Okay.
Yeah. As I was trying to unmute again.
To clap.
Yeah, congratulations. Fantastic work, Impact 606. It's great to again see all of the fruits of your labor and understand more about your work and your project. I'll pass it to Jenny again for her question.
Yes. Can I see your map again, please? Can you take me back to the site?
Yeah, just one second.
Thank you.
I'm really bad at screen sharing.
No, you're not alone. I mean, look, I try to play every video twice tonight. You're safe here. Okay. So this is partly a lack of I'm somewhat familiar with Chicago, but I'm assuming the audience for this tool are not the people who live where the dark green stars are. Correct. I'm assuming they live more in sort of Oak Park. Where does your audience live?
More or less, the audience is just the whole of Chicago that is not impacted by this, because oftentimes that news doesn't reach people farther than that have to live through it every day. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the here part of Chicago.
So the people, they don't live where the stars are. So yeah, one of the things, you're probably maybe not surprised that I'm going to say this, is that if I live in Lombard, I don't even know where that is. If I live in Lombard and I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it to be how far am I from this bad stuff? Honestly, as a human being, I'm how far am I from that bad stuff? And there's a part of me that's that's pretty far. This sucks to be those people. And one of the things that I'm wondering, this is not really a question, this is just a suggestion. Sorry, I was supposed to ask a question, but I think I have a suggestion that you might really like. So have access to wind current data that you can overlay over your map. And I wonder what would happen if you took wind current data and water current data and overlaid it so that you could see the direct, do you understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, it ties
one of my
directly into what you're
questions is,
talking about, like in your presentation about like making it significant to like the person viewing it.
you want to believe that somebody who is living in Oaklawn or Downers Grove is going to give half a crap of what happens in East Chicago and South Chicago, sorry. And like, I would like to believe that too, but sometimes we live in a world where they don't. So that would be one very easy, like I said, I was just asked a question, but I'm just like, no, it's like one easy publicly available layer. And if you could just show how the wind is blowing from over there, because the wind blows off the lake, right? That's how the lake works, right?
I don't know
Depends on the time of day, actually.
But there is at least some point in the day, I've read about lake effects now, there is some point in the day where the wind blows off the lake onto the land, which means the wind is blowing past the dark green stars into the inland where maybe people aren't living. So that would be, I think I love how you can see very quickly how it's all concentrated and how unfair that is. And I think the question / challenge that I would have for you is, are there some ways, like showing the wind currents, like showing the water currents, that you can show how, even though it looks like this is a problem that's concentrated, it's actually a problem that impacts everybody. But I really like, the design is really good. The map works really well. I played with it earlier today. I liked to learn. I was like, wow, I had no idea how many polluting types there are and how many places there are. So that was really engaging. I think the only question that I would have for you is there something that you can overlay that kind of shakes people out of their complacency of that's really bad and that's far from my house, and makes it feel a little bit closer to home than maybe it would naturally.
Yeah, I think that's like a phenomenal suggestion to make it more like personable to like the viewer themselves.
Thanks. I really like making phenomenal suggestions. I'm a creative director by trade. So when I see something where I'm like, oh, this is just one tiny little thing that you could do that would make them be like, oh my goodness, that wind is pointing that pollution right at my house, I can't help myself. But that's like, I love also that you just took this data. Like that's one of the things I get excited about technology right now is you have all of this data that's publicly available, that if you just put it together in the right way, you're able to tell a story and it's already out there. Like, that's what I think is really interesting about this. You took data that's already out there that nobody has actually thought about and put it together in a way that makes it really visual. And I think if you add that one little layer of other publicly data that's out there that nobody's thought to layer over it, they don't even have to interact, but people will be able to make that connection and be like, oh goodness, I guess I better do something about this. Thank you. This is really exciting. Oh, sorry, Lynn, I didn't mean to call out Oak Park.
I think those are great suggestions. And also I agree in terms of, I wasn't even aware. I've been in Chicago area about 2 years now, and I was not aware of any of this. So it's great to see this tool and be able to see it. And also there seems to be a lot of action in the chat with ideas for overlays or hooks to make it more engaging. So take a look at the chat.
That is how you know you have a good idea. And that is one of the hardest things about designing a game is I've struggled with this all the time where I'm like, no, that was my idea. Like, no, our idea was this. Like, why are you trying to add stuff or change my idea? And I think one of the things that I learned, not as early as I wish I had, but eventually, was that when people get really excited and they want to weigh in and they want to give you suggestions, like it can sometimes feel a little bit like they're like trying to tell you what to do with your game, but it's usually a sign that you've tapped into something. And that if people are excited and engaged, that means that there's energy there. And that is really exciting. Like, look at all these, like people are telling you, like, they're like, this is what would make me want to know about more about this and care about this. So I think it's hard to see that as a gift, but to get people talking and thinking and jumping in with suggestions is a sign that you've created something that people care about. And so that can be really exciting. once you get past a place where you're like, well, that's not what we're doing, guys. Not that I know anything about that feeling.
Yeah, and it's really exciting work, so I want to second that too. Congratulations. And I think we should do another round of clapping. I'm sure in person. So.
Laura, can I jump in for a moment before we do the general comments? If you don't know me, I'm Denise Nicholson, Director of the School of Design, and I've had the pleasure and honor of helping to kind of get this program going because of the generosity of our anonymous donor. Laura, who is here, helped me actually. We worked together in evaluating the projects, and I want to commend the teams for doing this work over a long time period, fully independently organizing yourselves, creating the processes, learning new skills along the way, probably having to negotiate decisions, manage your time, and create something that I think has impact in the world. It really does. And so this is exactly the heart of the work that we're the most proud of, coming from CDM and the School of Design. So I'm just so pleased to see it. I hope you had a great time. I hope you learned a lot, and that in the future maybe you can pay back by being a mentor to others who are going through a similar process. And I hope that we can do this. Do more events like this in the future. Jenny, thank you for giving your kind of overview and framing how we could bring design and learning and impact all together into a really fun process, I think. And I could see just how professional and engaged that you all were in the project. So I just want to say that and give my own round of applause for you. So good job.
Yeah, major kudos to both teams. And now I'd love to open it to Q&A. If anyone has any questions for either of the teams or Jenny, please feel free to jump in. We'd love to hear from you all and chat. If you prefer to put your question in the chat, I'm also happy to read it from the chat as well.
Hi, Rodolfo Gomez here. How does one try to work as a mentor for these types of projects, or become a mentor, I guess, is my question.
That is something that I think is in development. And if you are interested, you could reach out to me, and I will keep you in mind as we do more events like this. This is now, we've done this type of thing for a couple of years now. And so I see that as building a community. It's kind of like building some, folks who've gone through it. So that's to be determined.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Denise, if I can jump in too. So my name is Bill, and I work with the College of Computing and Digital Media I raise support for the school. And there's nothing better from my perspective than seeing a presentation like this, because it says to us, it's such a clear example of the impact that support can have on the students. So congratulations to all of you. It's wonderful. And thank you for putting so much work into this. And thanks, Jenny, for your comments as well.
We have a question for Jenny in the chat from Tori. I'll read it out loud. Do you have a process you follow or recommend for backtracking from what you want people to care about to how you get them to care about it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's always grounded in research, in asking questions, in understanding where somebody is. Spend a lot of time. The Twitter text search box is my best friend. I find all kinds of insights there. Like when I was working on Spent, I literally went to the Twitter search box and typed in poor people just to see what people were saying. It was very fascinating. I spent a lot of time on Reddit. So a lot of time I'll just go and sort of dig in to see what people are saying, thinking, feeling in the world. And then a lot of it is just empathy work. It's just understanding, you know, like when we were working on Payback, it's like I try to remember what I was thinking about when I was getting ready to go to college, and recognizing that when I was getting ready to go to college, everybody was like, the money, everyone, I'm sure y'all are just a lot fresher to you guys than it is to me, but I feel like the story I overheard was like, don't worry about the money will take care of itself. And so I didn't worry about the money, and I worried that I figured the money would take care of itself. And really remembering what it was like, and remembering like that first like email back and forth with my roommate, and how anxious I was, and how worried whether or not she was going to like me, like remembering those emotions and realizing that that is something that if I'm on the cusp of going to college, those are things I want to know what it's going to be like. And I'm really nervous about, and I'm not sure what to imagine. So, I mean, I don't know if that's answering your question, but the beginning part of the process is empathy. And then it's just trying to find a hook. Like, so we're like, well, when it comes to Shady Sam, it's like, well, what do people care about? Like, they don't care about interest rates. They don't care about like loan length versus interest rate versus monthly payment versus term. Like, they don't care about that. What people do care about is not getting ripped off. And that was what the pivot was like. Okay, what is that? It's always about that higher level thing, right? It's always about that higher level thing. So, you know, I think it's finding something to tap into that. So, you know, looking at your stuff, it's, you know, everybody wants love, and everybody wants to feel like they know how to work a relationship. And that's what like is so interesting about those dating simulators, is they're usually about being the bad guy. Like from what I've seen that I'm playing, it's always like, can you just like mess up this woman's life? So tapping into something in culture that you can pivot on, that you know people are into. Or I think with your impact success, it's like a map is a very powerful thing. A map is very, very powerful, because a map shows you who lives where and where people live and where they don't live. So I think tapping into some of those things that we don't even realize that we use as determiners of who we are and what matters to us, things that we do for fun. Actually, the secret behind Spent is the way that I came up with the idea of Spent is my dad at the time was playing Farmville. Does anybody remember Farmville? My dad got really into Farmville, like really, it was a lot. And so I was getting Facebook notifications all like multiple times a day from my dad. It was like, Mark needs more sweet potatoes for his farms. Like Mark needs help building his barn. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. And one day I was in the shower, washing my hair. I don't know why I have to dramatize this for you. And I remember thinking, like the client had briefed us, and I remember thinking, what would it be like if I got a Facebook notification from my dad that instead of saying, Mark needs you to help weed his lima beans, it was like, Mark can't pay his rent this month and needs to borrow some money. And that's where Spent came from. That is where Spent came from. So I think the very long way to answer your question is people will tell you what they're interested in by what they're doing. And what they're doing in culture is often the thing that they're interested in. And so if you can sort of pay attention to what they're doing and try to figure out where can what I'm trying to get them to care about connect with what they're doing in culture and what they're paying attention to and what they're worried about, then those are where those little pivot points and connections can help create some energy. Because without energy, and without tension, it's very, very hard to get people to care. If you're just straight educating them, that's hard, because that requires them to be interested, and that requires them to seek out knowledge. And as you all know, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like, Jenny, you can seek out knowledge or you can watch Below Deck, I'm gonna watch Below Deck. It's a very horrible good show on Bravo. If anybody wants to talk about Below Deck later, let me know. So yeah, pay attention, show what's going on in life, pay attention to culture, see what people are talking about. Use, like, the greatest thing about social media is that people are talking about stuff and they don't realize anybody's listening. And it's really fun to see what people are saying when they don't realize that people are listening. So make vast enthusiastic use of Reddit and Twitter, where you can watch people having conversations about things. Like if you're doing something with dating, go look at the like dating advice subreddit, or I'm not going to say it out loud, IATA on Reddit is a great place to see where people are dealing with conflict in relationships and steal all of that stuff. So yeah, basically my short answer is steal.
Definitely think shower thoughts are always the best ones.
Always. Yes. People are always
Yeah.
like, where did spent come from? And I want to have like this very deep answer. And I'm like, it came from my father playing Farmville and driving me nuts.
Any other questions? We have about 4 minutes, so I think we have time for one more. But if not, I will thank everyone again.
I see Lucia did ask a question. I'm looking at the chat about my favorite serious game to play that I did not make. Oh, that's so good.
Oh, I missed it. I'm glad you said.
There's so many good ones. There's one, is it called Black Bar? There's one about censorship that I really love because it's this, like, have any of you played it? I see you nodding. It's this beautiful game about censorship, and the mechanic is just so simple because all it is you have to figure out what the censors blacked out, and it's an iPhone app game. It's so minimal, it's so exquisitely done, and it just really makes you think about like what it's like to try to communicate when somebody's controlling your communications. But then the like real problem solving puzzle aspect of trying to figure out what the censors blacked out in Black Bar is just a very addictive game. I really love that one. Oh, it's so hard to pick. Another one that I love is called Papers, Please, which is very much where you are playing as, you know, this moment where people are trying to get across the border, people are trying to keep you from getting across the border. And it really gets into that empathy of that moment of what's it like to try to get across the border when you're like maybe an immigrant who doesn't have proper documentation, and what's it also like to be somebody who is having to decide whether or not somebody is allowed in. So that Papers, Please is just a very rich thing because it takes this one little moment and kind of explodes all of it. And then this last one might be a little bit unexpected, and I would say Fortnite. Did anybody try the thing that they did in Fortnite with the March on Washington for Martin Luther King Jr.? So Fortnite, and I will say it was not the most skillfully done thing I've seen in the world. So you can actually, I think if you go in through it, does anybody play Fortnite other than me? Okay, well, if you play Fortnite, you can go in through the creative thing, and they actually built a Fortnite version of the Washington Mall. And you actually come in with you in your Fortnite outfit and other people in their Fortnite skins, and there's this big screen playing over the Washington Mall of Martin Luther King Jr. giving his famous speech that he gave in the March on Washington. And then they have games that, like, some of them are like not. Some of them I'm like, I don't want to jump on the pillars of justice to try to get the orb of freedom. Like some of them are a little gross, but it's really interesting to play because even though it's like slightly not perfectly executed, it shows you some of the power when a platform like that. How many people, did any of you watch Travis Scott in Fortnite? Or watch the comment in Fortnite. So one of the things that's fascinating about Fortnite is they're creating this actual world where they're having live events and things happening in the world where millions of people are gathering at the same time to do something in a video game. And even though, like, I'm really curious, please, if anybody goes and tries out the March on Washington in Fortnite, please report back so we can talk about it. But even though it wasn't done, I think with as much sophistication and care as I would have liked, I think it really started to get me thinking about the opportunities to use these metaverse spaces to educate. I mean, there are probably people who'd never even like seen the speech before, actually watched it, or they had some challenges where you actually had to learn about the people who were involved. You had to see some of the photos from the bus boycott from the March on Washington. So it was very interesting to see a like dumb game try to actually use its platform and audience to make some change in the world. And I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities there. And I think they'll figure out how to do it a little bit more smoothly, because some of the games I was like, oh guys, no. It's like climb the hill to light the torch of freedom. Some of them were not great, but I think there's a lot of potential. There's, as usual, a very long answer to a short question. Specialty.
I'm like writing down the games. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's 7:30. So I'm going to thank everyone and say good night. Congratulations again to the teams. That was just so amazing. It was such an enriching evening, I think, from Jenny's talk to seeing both of your projects. And I hope we'll see each other again soon.
Thanks for having me. I encourage anybody, I'm on all the social platforms, just look for Jenny Nicholson. You can find me. If any of you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to be connected, because this is the funnest job in the whole world. And I'm excited to have more people join me.
That's so great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Laura.